Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, starting off our discussion with Dr. Amir. Doctor, now talking about the Tunisian file, Tunisia has been going through a lot of developments. I mean, all the political developments have been taking place for about over a decade now, but quite recently we've seen protests, we've seen the Tunisian President Kais Saied suspending the parliament, forcing or sacking the whole cabinet, and now, after quite some time, he has chosen a new cabinet headed by the first female Prime Minister, Najla Boudin, within the Middle East, actually the first in the Middle East. How would you rate the developments of taking place in Tunisia and how President Kais Saied was actually handling them to reach the stage that we are in right now?
Well, what is really special about Tunisia is that it's a small country in North Africa, but every leader who comes to this country has history, from Habib Bourguiba, then Zayn al-Abidine Ben Ali, then al-Marzouki, then the late President Essebsi, and then we have now President Kais Saied. So all of them eventually were present in very historical periods of this country, and it always affected the whole region. So that's why it's very special that we talk about Tunisia and its relation with Egypt and the whole southern Mediterranean countries, I mean North Africa. Of course, what President Kais Saied made was very bold action. It had to be done at this specific moment. The fact that he put aside the government, he sacked the government and stopped the parliament, and at the same time tried to figure out how to to put aside also the Al-Nahda, which is the Muslim Brotherhood party there, led by Ghannouchi. It was a very, very difficult task for this country. Was shaken by the first Arab Spring, and it was also very difficult for him to maintain this security inside the country, because we have known that after the first Arab Spring there that took place in sacked Zayn al-Abidine Ben Ali, the country unfortunately was very shaken by terrorist attacks, by turmoil. So he has done something very, very important for his country, for his people. And now that he has chosen the woman, the first woman leading the country, this is very, very important to show the world that this step was not against democracy. No, it was pushing forward Tunisia towards more liberal and more open and just society. We all know that the people of Tunisia, they are known for their open mind way of thinking, approaching to Europe more, but unfortunately the story of the radical movements who are taking place sabotaged their aspiration at a certain time.
Well, we've seen the protests taking place lately that actually led to the president sacking the government and also suspending the parliament. There were protests about governmental corruption, administrative corruption, talking about how the country was handling the COVID-19 pandemic. So with the swearing in of this new government, do you feel that these steps that were taken by the president would actually reach or lead the way to solutions for these issues, corruption and dealing with the health crisis?
Well, it's good to mention about the health crisis, because just before the action of President Kais Ben Saied, there was a very difficult situation for the pandemic COVID-19. It was everywhere in Tunisia. Hospitals couldn't manage the situation anymore. Algeria had to send oxygen. Saudi Arabia had to send oxygen to Tunisia. Even Egypt sent medical aid. So we had to, everyone had to help this small country to manage its struggle against the COVID-19. But concerning corruption, I think that President Qais bin Said, he had the data about who was doing what at that time, because if we study carefully how he targeted some positions, the head of the radio and TV there, the head of the people who are leading some administrative positions, he managed to know how amount of money they got, why it was used like that, how the people were anxious to know where the money was going. So I think that he had the info and he had studied very well everyone in his country, in his administration, and he knew who to stop at the right moment. So once again, it is a very difficult task. It is not easy for a president like him to find this way against this radical movements who are controlling the country. We all know that now his life is also put in stake. So he has taken the very important step that saved Tunisia. And I think that he collaborated with several of Arab countries, especially Egypt, to reinforce the security, to try to get more info and data about who's doing what in his country. And it helped him very much.
Well, the new Prime Minister Boudin was actually, in her speech, she was talking about how the new government will be really looking to appoint the right people for the right ministries, not using the office as a means to make some money and use it for the wrong reasons and use it for the wrong purposes. And she also talked about how the youth will play an integral part in the political future and political life in Tunisia. How hopeful and how much do you believe in these statements made by Prime Minister Boudin?
Well, Mrs. Nagla Boudin is known for her militant activities before in the social movements inside of Tunisia. So she has a history of a woman who leads many movements and knows how to take decisions. Let's be optimistic, because I think that behind her is a whole nation, and as you said, the youth also. They are willing to follow her on the right path. And I think President Qais bin Said chose the right person because she is the one who knows the street. She knows the voice of the people, the voice of the youth, and she knows how to attract them to the moderate, not the radical, the moderate view of politics and Tunisia. So I think that she could be someone that will make history in her country. But let us be very careful that unfortunately the movements, the radical movements, especially Al-Nahda, will not stop there. They will try to sabotage all what is doing, because they're not willing to lose everything easily. But with the help of neighboring countries, with the help of Egypt also, who went through the war against terrorism and still waging war against terrorism, and with the help of a loyal and dear friend to Tunisia, which is President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who gives the advice without looking for other interests, but to give the right advice to help the neighboring countries to develop. Because the security of every country in this region is our security also. We have seen how when chaos was everywhere, we were affected. So I think that with the help of Egypt and leading countries, things would be better, and Mrs. Nagla Boudin would do a great job.
Yes. Dr. Amir, now you spoke about the radical factions, and you've mentioned the Ennahda party, which is the Muslim Brotherhood's presence in the political life in Tunisia. Now, since the Arab Spring took place, a lot of political developments were taking place, not just in Tunisia, but throughout the whole Arab region. Now, how big of a role do you feel Ennahda is playing within the political life in Tunisia? Was it the same as it was a few years ago? Is it changing with the different governments? Is it changing with different presidents?
Well, look, sometimes when your enemy speaks, it's helpful. It's not harmful. For example, Mr. Marzouki was the former president, and he was very, very appreciated by Al-Nahda. He said something which is weird and funny, but it's very good for the people of Tunisia. He said, let's not be the example of Egypt. And I think that the people of Tunisia wish to be like Egypt, wish to have a president like President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. So when he said it, I think he made a great favor for explaining that they are going on the right path, which is Egypt. So I think that the Ghannouchi party and the Nahda party, I think they are now facing a very difficult task in the history of this movement. Why? Because they have, at the time they ruled the country, there was the pandemic, COVID-19, no one managed to control it. There was corruption, there was terrorism, there was intellectual terrorism. No one could have said a word against them. I think that the youth also were suffering from unemployment. It was historical. So it's a series of failures, of, let's be very clear, social failures, because they always portray themselves as political victims. Well, they had to deal with the problems of the people, and they failed, as the Muslim Brotherhood did in Egypt. Same thing. So when they say we are heading towards the Egyptian example, that's very bright for Tunisia.
Yes. And do you feel that the people themselves are following them? Are they really not trusting them at all? How much weight do they have even in parliament?
Look, Tunisia, as I said, is a small country, a small population, lots of youth, and they are very Western in their way of thinking. And the time of Al-Habib Bourguiba and Zain al-Abidin Ben Ali, it was a very liberal part in their history. So Al-Nahda and Marzouki was, fortunately, very brief in their history. They didn't have the time to affect the people. Maybe they were sympathizing with them because the youth wanted to get rid of, at that time, the regime of Zain al-Abidin Ben Ali. So they were the reaction. As we know, it happened in several countries. That was just a reaction against the opposite. But when they came to the real task, they didn't want to live this nightmare. It's a nightmare. So I think that now President Qais bin Said knows very well that he has the street behind him, he has the army behind him, and, which is very important, he has his neighbors and Egypt behind him. So he has a full support from everyone. The young people want a real leader who does not look at them as objects or try to manipulate them with slogans, religious slogans. No. He is a man leading the country towards a road outside of these crises, which was made by these people.
Dr. Amir, you've mentioned that Tunisia does have the backing of Egypt, and President al-Sisi has voiced confidence in the new government and the bold decisions, as you've mentioned, of Qais Said. Now, it seems that there were so many contacts and phone calls and consultations between President al-Sisi and President Qais Said before each and every bold sort of decision. And as it seemed at the beginning during the Arab Spring that both countries were going on the same paths, however, the developments in Egypt were in one direction as opposed to the Tunisian one. how big of a role do you feel Egypt is playing in terms of the political and presidential developments that are taking place there?
Well, what took place between the relations, especially between President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and his Tunisian counterpart, President Qais bin Said, is, let's call it like that, a diplomatic miracle. Because when President Qais bin Said became president, he was very hostile to Egypt. He was under the pressure of these radical movements, and he thought that Egypt was not the good example to follow. And he had this image, wrong image about President Sisi and Egypt. And when he was in office, he thought who was betraying him, and he was the loyal friend. And at the time of difficulty, the loyal friend was President Sisi. President Sisi has this way of thinking of, let's put aside the personal and political differences, as he did with the West when he became president. Let's talk, let's exchange about our national interests, both countries. And he explained to his Tunisian counterpart, I do not wish any harm for Tunisia. What they are telling you about Egypt, you have to experience it by yourself. And he invited President Qais bin Said to come to Cairo. And they had long talks, frank long talks, as President Sisi always do it. It took hours. And he explained to him that you have to listen and watch by your eyes, observe, because you're leading a country, what is right and wrong. And when President Qais bin Said went back to Tunisia, he started opening his eyes to the reality that there was something wrong in the country, that there was some people leading his country towards destruction. And then he started contacting President Sisi. And President Sisi explained to him that things should go gradually till the right moment to act. And this is political science. What President Sisi gave to the Tunisian people and President Qais bin Said, it's political science, that there's the right moment to act, but study the data before, study the situation carefully, do not listen to the rumors, visit other countries by yourself and exchange with these presidents by yourself, and then you will find the reality. So as he said, before each bold step, he had this contact with President Sisi. And I think this is what Marzouki said, we are heading to Egypt's example. Well, it's a good thing, because we have seen that now the pandemic, the COVID-19 stopped in Tunisia. The people who are the thieves in the country were put behind the bars. The country managed to have a government. The first woman became a prime minister. The sun was suddenly bright on this country when they started talking to President Sisi and to Egypt.
Well, as Dr. Amir mentioned, the relationship between Egypt and Tunisia, it's not just a recent relationship. Both countries have strong ties politically, economically, and even in the cultural level as well. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.